I've never been the type to take shortcuts. My whole life I've had this need to prove I could stand on my own 2 feet. My dad offered to help me through college, even pay my rent if I wanted, but I turned him down. Not because I was ungrateful, far from it, but because depending on someone else felt like weakness. So after high school, while most of my friends were off at universities flashing their parents' credit cards and partying in dorms, I stayed in Columbus. I enrolled at the local community college and picked up a night shift job at the Domino's on East Broad Street. It wasn't glamorous. The pay was barely enough for rent, gas, and microwave meals, but it was mine. I usually worked closing shifts 3 nights a week, Fridays, Saturdays, and the dreaded Wednesdays. Fridays and Saturdays at least had some energy, late-night orders, drunk customers, and the occasional laugh. But Wednesdays? God, those dragged like you wouldn't believe. Silent, slow, the kind of nights where the tick of the wall clock feels like it's echoing in your skull. Our store manager was Rick Garza, mid-40s, balding, smoker's cough that sounded like it was tearing holes in his lungs. He wasn't a bad boss exactly, just angry, tired, and impatient. He'd worked construction before a back injury forced him out, and I always got the sense that every pizza he boxed was a reminder of what he lost. But if you asked anyone who Rick yelled at the most, the answer was always the same. Marcus. Marcus was our delivery driver, early 20s, thin as a rail, with shadows under his eyes like bruises that never healed. He never smiled, never joked around with us, never even looked anyone in the eye. The only thing he ever really talked about was his mom. She'd gotten sick a couple years back, and Marcus was her only caretaker. We respected him for it. Hell, I did too. But Marcus was a disaster at the job. Orders went missing. He mixed up addresses. Sometimes he'd come back an hour late, empty-handed. Rick threatened to fire him at least 3 times in 1 month. But each time he stopped short, like something in Marcus's hollow stare made him pull back. I didn't think much of it. Not until that night. The alley. It was early October, cold enough that my breath fogged as I pulled my Chevy Nova into the lot. The Nova was a hand-me-down from my dad, black, beat-up, loud engine, steering stiff as hell. It looked like something out of a Tarantino flick, but I loved her. I parked around back and started walking toward the rear door when I heard shouting in the alley. Rick's voice. I parked around back and started walking toward the rear door when I heard shouting in the alley. Rick's voice. This week. I froze, peeking around the corner. Marcus stood hunched, shoulders curled like a child caught cheating on a test. His Domino's cap hung low, hiding most of his face. I'm sorry, Rick, he mumbled. It won't happen again. Rick jabbed a finger at his chest. I've been cutting you slack because of your mom, but I swear to God, one more screw-up and you're gone. You understand me? Marcus just nodded. Rick spat on the ground, muttered something, then stormed off to his car. Tires squealed as he peeled out of the lot. I hesitated, then walked toward Marcus. Hey, man. You good? He didn't answer. Just stood there, staring at the ground. Finally, I asked, You lose another one? That's when he looked up. His eyes. Jesus. They weren't angry or guilty or even sad. They were empty. Like he hadn't slept in days, like he was staring through me instead of at me. I let it go. But something about the look stuck with me. The call by 8:30, the store was dead quiet. I was behind the counter when the landline rang. Most customers used the app or ordered online, so the old phone almost never rang. Domino's Pizza. How can I help you? The voice on the other end was flat, slow, almost monotone. Yeah, I want a large Philly cheesesteak, extra cheese, extra ketchup. I scribbled down the name, Ethan. The address was close, House 4412, Cherry Lane, barely 2 blocks away. When I hung up, Marcus was already watching me. Who was it? He asked. Local, large steak pizza, extra ketchup. The way his fingers twitched made me pause. That's close, he muttered. Yeah, good for you, I said, trying to joke. Short drive. But he didn't smile. If anything, he looked scared. When the pizza was ready, I tried to lighten the mood. Hey, look, I know things have been rough. If you're hungry, I'll cover your meal tonight. Just don't screw this one up, all right? Marcus's head snapped toward me. His eyes burned. You think I'm eating them? I froze. What? The pizzas, he hissed, his voice barely a whisper. You think I'm the one eating them? I tried to laugh it off. Man, I was just kidding. Relax. His voice dropped lower. It's not me. It's Maddie. But he didn't explain. He just grabbed the box and rushed out the door. Midnight. That delivery should have taken 15 minutes. Half an hour later, no sign of Marcus. A pissed-off customer called, yelling they never got their order. I made some excuse about low supplies. By midnight, I was cleaning up, telling myself to forget about it. But something in my gut wouldn't let me leave. Then I saw headlights. Marcus's Corolla rolled into the lot, engine coughing. He didn't come inside. Instead, he got out slowly, holding the pizza box. His movements were deliberate, heavy, like every step took effort. Curiosity gnawed at me. Instead of calling out, I slipped behind the dumpster and watched. Marcus walked to the old storage unit behind the building. The door creaked as he pushed it open. He disappeared inside. Something in me said follow. Against every bit of common sense I had, I crept after him. The storage unit. The door was cracked. Through it I saw Marcus sitting cross-legged on the cold concrete floor. The pizza box lay open in front of him. He wasn't alone, at least not in his mind. This is the last time, Maddie, he said softly. I can't keep sneaking you these. They're starting to notice then. Another voice, high-pitched, childlike. But I'm so hungry. You promised I could stay. My chest tightened. The storage unit was empty, just Marcus in the box, but I swear to God I heard that voice. Maddie, his little sister, the one who died years ago in a freak accident. Marcus opened a drawer and pulled out a box cutter. Without hesitation, he sliced his palm. No ketchup tonight, he whispered. But I got something better. Thick drops of blood spattered onto the cheese, dark red soaking into the crust. Then his voice changed, higher, playful. The voice of a little girl. Thanks, Marcus. Domino's always makes it best. And then he started eating, laughing, carrying on a full conversation in that twisted child's voice, answering himself back and forth like two people trapped in one body. I stumbled back, gagging, bile rising in my throat. I don't even remember running. Just the cold air, the panic, the shaking in my legs. Aftermath. The cops came. They found him sitting there, box in front of him, mumbling nonsense to no one. He didn't resist, didn't speak to anyone. Just looked around the room like he was still searching for someone. The doctors said he had dissociative identity disorder. Losing Maddie shattered his mind. In his world, she wasn't gone. She was hungry, and he had to feed her. Marcus has been in a psychiatric facility ever since. Sometimes I visit him. He's quiet now, calm. But the last time I went, just as I stood to leave, he looked at me and smiled. If Maddie ever comes to your door, he whispered, don't forget the ketchup. I laughed nervously, told myself it was just another episode. But some nights when I'm home alone, I swear I hear it. A knock at the door, a child's voice, hungry, waiting. I worked as a Domino's driver for almost 2 years while I was in college. Most nights were boring, deliveries to dorm rooms, suburban homes, the occasional drunk frat guy trying to pay in quarters. But one night I got an order that I'll never forget. It was the kind of night that makes you question reality, the kind that makes you wonder if some places are cursed. It was early October, the air already sharp with the bite of fall. The rush was slowing down when the ticket came through. One large cheese pizza. No sides, no drinks, just plain cheese. That wasn't unusual, but the delivery address caught my eye. 1047 Hollow Creek Road. At first I didn't think much of it. I had grown up in Columbus, but I didn't know every street. Still, the name sounded familiar. I punched it into Google Maps on my phone and my stomach tightened when I saw where it was. Hollow Creek wasn't really a road anymore. It was more like a dirt path that cut through woods on the outskirts of town. I remembered kids at school whispering about it. Something about a fire. Something about a family that never made it out. I asked my manager, Rick, if he knew the address. He looked up from his cigarette and frowned. Someone's screwing with us. That place burned down in the 90s. Just take the damn pizza, and if no one answers, bring it back. Clock's ticking. I should have refused, but I didn't. The drive took almost half an hour. Streetlights grew fewer, houses farther apart. Soon it was just me, the pizza, and a narrow road swallowed by trees. My headlights bounced off sagging mailboxes and skeletal branches. The GPS insisted I was close, but all I saw was darkness. Then up ahead, a clearing. And there it was. The house. At least what was left of it. The roof sagged inward like a broken spine. Blackened bricks stood like rotten teeth. Windows were boarded, but some boards hung loose, flapping in the wind. Weeds swallowed the porch. A no trespassing sign leaned crooked in the yard, the letters faded almost white. I killed the engine. The silence pressed in heavier than anything I'd felt before. My phone buzzed. "You've arrived." My gut told me to leave. But then the porch light flicked on. My breath caught. The bulb glowed weakly, yellow and sickly, but unmistakably real. Someone was inside. I grabbed the pizza and walked up the uneven path. The air smelled of wet leaves and old smoke. The wood creaked under my shoes. I raised my hand and knocked on the door. Knock. 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 Silence. I tried again, louder this time. "Domino's! Large cheese pizza." That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, dragging, uneven. From the other side of the door. The knob rattled, then turned. The door opened just enough to reveal a pale, thin hand. The skin looked almost gray, stretched too tight over the bones. The hand trembled as it reached out, palm up. I forced a smile, my throat dry. That'll be $14.72. The hand didn't move, just waited. I swallowed, set the box in its grasp, and stepped back. The hand pulled it inside. The door slammed shut. That was it. No words, no money. I stood frozen for a good 10 seconds, staring at the peeling paint of the door. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Finally, I backed away, nearly tripping over the steps, and rushed to my car. I didn't even turn the receipt in. I just drove. Back at the store, I tried to explain. Rick cursed me out for giving away food, but I could tell even he didn't want to argue too much about Hollow Creek. Still, curiosity got the better of me. After my shift, I searched the house's history online. And that's when I found it. In 1993, the Parker family lived at 1047 Hollow Creek. 2 parents, 1 daughter, Emma, age 10. One night in November, their house caught fire. The parents' bodies were found in the kitchen. Emma was never found. Some said she burned away completely. Others whispered that she escaped, but no one ever saw her again. The part that made my blood run cold? The newspaper article had a photo of the Parkers. Emma, grinning with a gap-toothed smile, held a slice of cheese pizza. I didn't tell anyone, not at first. But a week later, another driver mentioned something strange. "Hey," he said, "did you ever get an order for Hollow Creek? I swear I saw it on the screen last night, but then it disappeared." I asked Rick about it. He didn't look up from his cigarette. "Don't talk about that place." I quit Domino's a few months later. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm driving and my GPS glitches, I swear I see that address pop up again. 1047 Hollow Creek Road. And every time I think of that pale hand, that silent exchange, that little girl who never got to grow up. And I wonder, if I'd stayed just a few seconds longer, would I have heard her voice? I started delivering pizzas for Domino's my sophomore year of college. It wasn't glamorous, but it was easy money. Drive around, hand off some food, pocket a few tips. The late-night shifts were always the worst, though. People too drunk to cook, creeps who answered the door half-dressed, neighborhoods that felt like graveyards after midnight. But one delivery in particular still haunts me. It happened on a Thursday in December. The kind of night when the cold seems alive, slapping your face the second you step outside. The store was dead, no orders for almost an hour when a ticket suddenly came through. Address: 3317 Brookhaven Lane. Order: medium pepperoni, breadsticks, and a 2-liter Coke. Nothing unusual. Except I'd never heard of Brookhaven Lane. The GPS directions took me off the main road past rows of dark houses until the streetlights disappeared entirely. Brookhaven wasn't really a lane. It was more like a dirt extension of the neighborhood that led into the woods. Only a handful of houses sat along it, spaced far apart, their driveways unlit. I slowed down, double-checking the address glowing on my screen. My headlights landed on an old 2-story house at the very end of the road. The shutters hung crooked, and the mailbox was leaning, its numbers barely legible. That was it, 3317. I parked, grabbed the food, and stepped out. The night was dead silent, no wind, no crickets, nothing. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked up the path. The house loomed like a shadow, its windows dark. I knocked once. "Domino's!" No answer. I knocked again, louder. The door creaked open, just a sliver, enough for me to see the hallway inside. Hello?" My voice cracked. "I've got your order." Still nothing, just the faint smell of mildew and dust. I set the pizza bag down, pulled out my phone, and dialed the number on the order slip. The ring cut through the silence, and then it came from inside the house. I froze. My phone vibrated, and I pulled it away from my ear. The screen said unknown caller, but I hadn't given my number to anyone. Before I could decline it, the call answered itself. Static hissed, then a whisper. "Don't turn around." My blood went cold. I spun anyway. At first I didn't see him. Then my eyes adjusted. A man stood at the edge of the woods just beyond my headlights. Tall, motionless. His clothes hung loose, shapeless. His face was hidden in shadow. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. I stumbled backward toward my car, clutching the pizza bag like a shield. My keys slipped from my pocket and clattered to the ground. In the split second I bent to grab them, I looked up again. He was closer, half the distance now, still silent. I dropped everything, scrambled into my car, and slammed the locks down. My hands shook as I turned the key. The headlights flared, bright, cutting through the dark. The man was gone. I don't mean he ran. I mean he vanished. No trace. 1 second there, the next, gone. I floored it out of Brookhaven, gravel spitting from my tires. I didn't stop until I was back at the Domino's parking lot. My manager chewed me out for not finishing the delivery, but I didn't care. I refused to go back. The next day I checked the order system. 3317 Brookhaven Lane wasn't in the database. No ticket, no charge, nothing. That house didn't even exist anymore. I looked it up later at the library. Brookhaven Lane used to end at an abandoned farmhouse. It burned down in the late 1980s after the owner went missing. His body was never found. Some locals claimed they still saw him wandering the road at night, watching anyone who dared to stop. I never told my manager the truth, but I'll tell you this. Every time I drive at night now, I check my mirrors. Because sometimes I swear I see him, a tall man, standing just far enough away that I can't make out his face, waiting. I've worked a lot of crappy jobs in my life, but nothing comes close to my year at Domino's. Most people think delivering pizzas is the worst part, but trust me, the kitchen has its own nightmares. I was 19, broke, and desperate for cash when I got hired at a Domino's just outside Cleveland. My job wasn't glamorous. Prep dough, chop toppings, clean the counters, and every so often stock the walk-in freezer. The freezer was my least favorite part. From the outside, it looked normal enough. Big steel door, buzzing compressor, faint frost creeping around the edges. But inside, it was something else. The light was always dim, flickering overhead like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay on. The air was damp, not crisp like a freezer should be. And worst of all, the smell. It wasn't the smell of pepperoni or mozzarella, it was sweet, almost like rotting fruit. I hated being in there alone. My shift usually ended around midnight, but one Friday we got slammed with late orders. The manager, Carl, asked me to stay until close. By 2 a.m., the last driver clocked out, and Carl told me to restock before I left. "Load up the pepperoni boxes," he said, tossing me the keys to the freezer. "Make sure it's good for tomorrow." I groaned but nodded. Anything for an extra hour on my paycheck. The kitchen was dead quiet by then, the hum of the ovens replaced with silence. I hauled a stack of boxes to the freezer, shoved the heavy door open, and stepped inside. The light flickered as usual, buzzing faintly. Cold air wrapped around me. I stacked the boxes on the wire shelves, trying to ignore the smell. Sweet, sour, rotten. I was about to leave when I heard it. A sound, soft, ragged, breathing. I froze, clutching the boxes to my chest. The sound came from deeper in the freezer near the back, where the frost gathered thick on the walls. "Carl," I called, my voice echoing off the metal. No answer. I set the boxes down and slowly stepped forward. My shoes squeaked on the slick floor. The light flickered again, casting shadows between the shelves. That's when I saw it, a handprint. Frost clung to the steel wall at the back, and in the center was a perfect handprint. Not mine. It was too small, too delicate. A child's hand. I stumbled back, my breath fogging in the air. My first thought was that someone had broken in, that a kid was hiding back here somehow. But then the handprint began to fade, not like melting, like it was being wiped away from the inside of the wall. The breathing grew louder. I bolted for the door, yanking the handle. It didn't budge. My heart hammered as I yanked again, harder this time. Still stuck. Then, tap, tap, tap. Something rapped against the metal shelves behind me. Slow, deliberate. I spun. Nothing. Just rows of cheese, sauce, frozen dough. But then I noticed one box, an old cardboard container shoved under the bottom shelf. It wasn't labeled. It didn't belong there. Against my better judgment, I pulled it out. The box was damp, its cardboard soft and sagging. I tore it open. Inside was a Domino's uniform, old, moldy, stiff with something dark. A name tag clung to the shirt by a single rusted pin. Eddie. I didn't know any Eddie. The breathing was right behind me now. Hot, moist air brushed the back of my neck. I dropped the box, slammed against the door, and pounded until my fists ached. "Let me out!" Carl. Somebody. The light flickered one last time, then went out. Pitch black. The air grew heavy, pressing in around me. And then a voice whispered, inches from my ear. "You shouldn't be in here," I screamed. My fists found the handle again, wrenching it down with all my weight. This time the door gave. I stumbled out, collapsing onto the kitchen floor. The lights in the kitchen were bright, almost blinding. I gasped for breath, my chest heaving. Carl burst out of the office, half asleep. "What the hell are you doing?" I pointed at the freezer, my voice broken. "There's someone in there." He looked at me like I was insane, marched to the door, and yanked it open. The light flickered inside, cold mist spilling out. Empty. No footprints. No box, no handprint. Just rows of toppings and shelves of dough. I quit a week later. Couldn't handle it anymore. But before I left, one of the older employees pulled me aside. She said something I'll never forget. "You know about Eddie, right?" I shook my head. "Kid worked here back in '98. Went into the walk-in during a late shift. Door jammed. They didn't find him until morning." Her eyes flicked toward the freezer. "Some say he never left. To this day, I can't step into a walk-in freezer without panicking. Every time I hear that faint buzz of the light overhead, I remember the handprint. And the voice, whispering just for me. You shouldn't be in here." Most Domino's deliveries blur together after a while. Same pizzas, same houses, same drunks fumbling for change at 1 a.m. But every now and then, an order comes through that makes no sense. An address you don't recognize, a phone number that doesn't connect, instructions that feel off. I got one of those calls on a rainy Tuesday night. The order was simple. One large pepperoni, thin crust, no cheese. Strange, but not unheard of. Some people are lactose intolerant, I guess. What caught my attention was the address, 17 Sycamore Lane. Sycamore Lane was on the far edge of town, a street I'd never delivered to before. When I asked my manager about it, he shrugged. GPS says it's real. Take it or I'll send someone else. So I packed the pizza, grabbed the receipt, and headed into the storm. The rain hammered my windshield as I drove. The streets grew emptier the farther I went. Streetlights flickered, then disappeared entirely. My GPS kept insisting I was 2 minutes away, but all I saw were stretches of forest and broken fences. Finally, I turned onto Sycamore Lane. Only, it wasn't a lane. It was a dirt road swallowed on both sides by trees. My headlights struggled to cut through the mist. Potholes rattled my car as I crawled forward, counting house numbers on half-rotted mailboxes. 15. 17. There it was. Except, there was no house. At least not one that should have still been standing. The driveway led to a sagging 2-story farmhouse. The windows were boarded up and the porch sagged like it might collapse under its own weight. A single light glowed faintly inside. I pulled up, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment, listening to the rain hammer the roof of my car. My gut screamed at me to turn around. But then movement. A figure in the upstairs window. Someone was waiting. I grabbed the pizza, stepped into the rain, and hurried up the muddy path. The porch groaned beneath my weight as I knocked on the door. Silence. I tried again, louder. Domino's! Large pepperoni, no cheese. The light inside flickered. A shadow passed across the hall. Slowly the door creaked open. A woman stood there, or what was left of one. Her hair hung in damp, tangled strands. Her skin was grayish, stretched too tight across her cheekbones. Her eyes were deep shadows, pupils too wide. She smiled faintly, lips cracked and pale. "You're late," she rasped. I swallowed hard, holding out the box. "Sorry, ma'am. That'll be $13.45. She tilted her head as if confused. Then she reached out, took the pizza, and closed the door without another word. I stood there, drenched, staring at the peeling paint of the door. Something about her face felt wrong, like I'd seen it before. Back at the store, I turned in the receipt. My manager frowned. "Sycamore Lane? That order never came through," I blinked. "What are you talking about? I just dropped it off." He pulled up the system on the computer. No record, no phone number, no charge. "Maybe you're overtired," he muttered. "Go home. Get some rest." But I knew what I saw. I couldn't sleep that night. Around 3 a.m., I sat at my laptop digging through old town records. I typed in 17 Sycamore Lane and froze when I saw the first result. In 1985, the house had burned down. A woman named Evelyn Brooks died in the fire. The article had her photo. It was the same face I saw at the door. I told myself it was coincidence, my mind playing tricks. But a week later, it happened again. Another strange order, another impossible address. This time, I didn't go. But sometimes, late at night, my phone buzzes with calls from unknown number. When I answer, all I hear is the crackle of flames and a woman's voice whispering, "You're late." Closing shifts at Domino's are lonely. Anyone who's worked food service knows the drill. Scrub the counters, mop the greasy floors, count the drawer, and hope no one places an online order 1 minute before closing. I'd been working nights for nearly 6 months at our Domino's in Millstone, Pennsylvania, a small industrial town that smelled like rust and rain. The day manager, Cindy, always left early, so it was just me in the ovens until 2 a.m. I didn't mind the silence. The steady hum of the walk-in fridge, the click of the oven timer, the fluorescent buzz overhead. You get used to it. But that night, December 19th, I noticed it felt heavier. Like the silence wasn't empty. Like something else was listening. The shift had started normal. A few delivery orders, a couple teenagers giggling at the counter, one guy who argued about coupons until I wanted to throw the receipt printer at him. By midnight, it was dead quiet. I turned the lock, flipped the sign to closed, and began my routine. Dough trays stacked, tomato sauce bucket sealed, mop bucket filled with hot water. That's when the phone rang. Not the store phone, the old red landline in the back office. I froze. That phone had been disconnected years ago. Manager told me it was just there for show, hooked to nothing. Yet it rang. Slow, deliberate, each shrill tone echoing through the empty store. Against every instinct, I answered, "Hello?" Static. Then a faint voice. "Don't close yet." I hung up so fast I nearly dropped the receiver. My hands shook. I told myself it was some crossed signal from another business. Old wires, nothing supernatural. I went back to mopping, but then I noticed something. A trail of wet footprints leading from the back door into the kitchen. Bare feet, too small to be an adult's. My first thought was a break-in, maybe some kid messing around. I grabbed the pizza cutter, stupid weapon, but it was sharp, and followed the prints. They stopped at the walk-in fridge. The handle was slick, like condensation. But when I pulled the door open, the smell hit me first. Not just cold air. Rot. Inside, under the faint blue light, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. A pizza box, not ours. Old yellowed cardboard. The Domino's logo from the 1980s. I crouched down. The box wasn't dusty. It looked fresh. My breath fogged as I reached out and lifted the lid. Inside was a single slice of pizza. The cheese was congealed gray, crawling with maggots, and written on the underside of the lid in dark marker, "Thanks for delivering, Maddie." I slammed the fridge shut and staggered back. My chest felt tight, like something was watching me from behind the racks of dough. I dropped the cutter, grabbed my keys, and bolted for the front door. Except the lock wouldn't turn. The knob twisted in my hands, but the door stayed shut. I pounded on the glass, screamed for help, but the street outside was dead. Behind me, the ovens beeped, but I'd turned them off an hour ago. The digital screen flashed 2:17 a.m., though my phone said 12:43. Then the oven door creaked open on its own. Inside, instead of pizza, was a small pair of shoes. Burnt, melted to the rack. And a voice, soft and childlike, drifted from the office phone. "You're late?" I don't remember how I got out. Maybe I blacked out. Maybe the door finally opened on its own. All I know is when the morning manager found me, I was sitting in the parking lot, drenched in sweat, clutching that old pizza box. The store never found any footprints. No old phone, no melted shoes. But the box, they burned it out back. And still, some nights when I drive by, I see the oven light glowing even when the store is dark. And I hear that voice in my head, "Don't close yet." Working delivery at Domino's was supposed to be simple. Drop off the food, get a tip if you're lucky, and move on to the next address. But that night, I got an order that never should have existed. It was late September, a stormy night in the quiet suburb of Briarwood Heights. The rain was so heavy I could barely see the road. I was the only driver scheduled until close, which meant every order was mine. At 11:42 p.m., just as I thought we'd be done, the screen blinked with one more online order. Large pepperoni, extra cheese, garlic breadsticks. But what caught my eye wasn't the food. It was the address, 342 Hollow Pine Road. I'd lived in Briarwood all my life, and I knew for a fact there was no such road. I told my shift manager. She looked confused, clicked around the system, then shrugged. "It processed. Someone paid online. You gotta take it. But that street doesn't exist. GPS says it does. Just go. Don't argue over a $30 order." So I packed it up, slid into my car, and typed it into Google Maps. Sure enough, the pin dropped into the woods outside town. No houses, just black forest. I should have turned around, should have said no. But my rent was late and tips meant everything. So I drove. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. The storm had stopped, but the trees pressed in close like a tunnel of shadows. My headlights cut through only 20 feet ahead, everything else swallowed in black. After 15 minutes of winding back roads, my GPS chirped, "You have arrived." I stopped. In front of me was a long gravel driveway leading to a house that looked wrong. It was a two-story colonial but sagging. The shutters hung loose, the paint peeled in strips. No lights, no cars, just the faint smell of smoke in the air. Still, I grabbed the pizza bag and stepped out. The night was silent, too silent. Even the crickets were gone. When I reached the porch, the wood creaked under my weight. I knocked. The door opened on its own. "Domino's," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Got your order." No answer. Inside, the air was cold and damp like a basement. The smell of mildew clung to everything. I should have left the food on the porch and gone, but I stepped inside. The living room looked abandoned, furniture covered in white sheets, dust thick on the mantel. But in the center of the coffee table sat an old, cracked photo frame. I picked it up. Inside was a picture of a family, a father, a mother, and a little girl, smiling, holding a pizza box. Domino's, but their faces had been scratched out, deep gouges where the eyes used to be. My skin crawled. I turned to leave, but the door behind me slammed shut. The pizza bag slipped from my hands. From upstairs, I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, dragging. Then a child's voice whispered, clear as if it were right next to me. "Did you bring my dinner?" My body locked. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I only managed to whisper, "Yeah. It's here." The air turned colder. My breath fogged. Then the pizza bag on the floor shifted. Slowly, the lid opened by itself. The garlic breadsticks inside were gone. In their place was something else. A little shoe, burnt, blackened, and a folded piece of paper. My shaking hands opened it. In messy, childlike handwriting, it read, "You're late again." "Don't forget next time." I bolted for the door, but it wouldn't open. I kicked, slammed my shoulder into it, panicking. Until suddenly it gave way and I tumbled out onto the porch. When I looked back, the house was gone. Just trees, just endless woods. I drove faster than I ever have in my life, my chest heaving, tears in my eyes. Back at the store, I dropped the bag on the counter. My manager frowned. "Where are the breadsticks?" I don't know. But when she opened the bag, they were there, perfectly fresh. And at the very bottom of the bag was the folded note. "Don't forget next time." I quit the next day. But sometimes when I'm driving home late, my GPS glitches. And for just a second, it reroutes me toward 342 Hollow Pine Road. And I hear that voice, faint in the back seat. "Did you bring my dinner?" I'd been working at Domino's for about 4 months when the nightmares started. At first, I thought they were just stress dreams. Burnt crusts, angry customers forgetting to cut a pizza before boxing it. Typical food service anxiety. But these dreams were different. They all started the same way. I'd be standing in front of the walk-in freezer and I'd hear knocking. Soft, desperate, coming from inside. And a voice, always the same, whispering, "Let me out." I'd jolt awake, sweaty, shaken, but never thought too much of it. Until the night the dream followed me into reality. It was a Sunday night, the slowest shift of the week. Just me and later Marcy, the evening closer. Around 9:30, I was finishing prep when I heard it. A knock, coming from the freezer. I froze, dough clinging to my fingers, and turned slowly toward the steel door. The knock came again. 3 times, firm, rhythmic. "Marcy?" I called, even though I knew she hadn't arrived yet. Silence. The hair on my neck stood up. I told myself it was the compressor, the ice shifting, something. But my chest felt heavy. Against better judgment, I pulled the handle and opened the door. Cold air poured out, fogging around my arms, but the freezer was empty. Stacks of dough trays, boxes of wings, no one inside. I stepped in anyway, just to prove to myself it was nothing. I even knocked on the back wall, laughing nervously. "See? Just a dream." Then as I turned to leave, the door slammed shut. My heart jumped into my throat. I yanked the handle, stuck. My breath quickened, fogging the air. The cold bit deep into my fingers. And then the knocking started again. Only this time it wasn't from behind the door. It was coming from inside the freezer with me. I spun around. The sound echoed from the far corner behind the stacked dough trays. Something moved, a shadow shifting, too big to be mine. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. Silence. I edged closer, shivering violently now. As I reached the trays, I saw it, just for a second. A hand, small, pale, pressed against the frost-covered wall. Then it sank backward, vanishing into the ice itself. I screamed and tore at the door handle until finally it gave way. I stumbled out, collapsed against the counter, gasping. Marcy walked in a few minutes later, sipping an iced coffee, eyeing me like I'd lost it. "You look like hell. You good?" I didn't answer, just muttered something about slipping. But when I glanced back at the freezer door, I saw something I couldn't explain. A handprint, small, child-sized, perfectly pressed into the frost of the steel. And it hadn't been there before. The weeks after that were torture. Every shift I heard the knocking, sometimes faint, sometimes sharp enough to rattle the racks inside. One night I swore I heard crying from in there. A child's sobs muffled through the door. I begged management to let me switch to daytime. They laughed, said I was just burned out. But I wasn't imagining it, because then Marcy heard it too. We were closing together when she dropped a tray of wings in shock. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The knocking, clear as day. We both turned toward the freezer. This time the knocks were frantic, like fists pounding, urgent, desperate. Marcy's face drained of color. "Someone's in there." I wanted to scream, "No one is in there," but my throat locked. She ran forward, yanked the door open, and froze. Her iced coffee dropped from her hand, spilling across the tiles. Inside the freezer was a girl, no older than 7, long dark hair, bare feet. Her skin was pale, almost bluish, and frost clung to her lashes. She stared at us with hollow, glassy eyes. "Finally," she whispered. "You opened it." Then she stepped forward and vanished into the air. Marcy quit the next day. She didn't even come back for her last paycheck. I tried to tell myself we'd hallucinated it. Stress, exhaustion, shared paranoia. But then I saw the store records. Buried in the office files under a dusty stack of old invoices, I found a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1997. "Local girl found dead in restaurant freezer." The photo showed her face, the same face I'd seen. Now every time I pass that Domino's, I swear I can still hear her, knocking, always knocking. And I know one night someone will open the door again. And this time, she won't leave.